and I'd like to welcome you to another episode, another installment of the Change of Trois. And as you know by now, this is an opportunity to gather with two change makers who are typically from different generations to talk about their change efforts and the impact that they are having and could possibly have on the world around us. I am truly excited today to be joined by two dear friends and two people that I respect greatly. Cimajie Best, who is based in Dallas, Texas, and Dr. Calvin Mackie, who is in New Orleans as a base. But both of them work across this country. Greetings to you, Cimajie, and to Dr. Mackie.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for today.
Thank you, Brother Justin, for having me.
I'm glad that you guys are here. Just a warning, I may at any moment turn my camera off just to make certain that the audio stays best. And what it allows for is the two people who are the focus of this time together to actually be the center of attention. I want to start with this. Cimajie Best, who are you in 25 words or less?
25 words or less. I'm a writer, a narrator, so to speak. I think one of my giftings is to make sure that our histories, our young Black people, our histories are recorded properly.
Okay. Calvin Mackie, 25 words or less.
That's a tall order, Brother Justin, 25 words. But besides being a husband and a father and a community activist, and a STEM activist, I would say I'm a purveyor of hope. My entire life and life story has been one where my goal has been to bring hope to not only our communities, but everybody I meet.
Yeah, and I love that, being a purveyor of hope. And you talk about our communities and community. Cimajie, you talked about the importance of narratives and stories, particularly of young Black America. I want to dive in by asking you guys, so what do you see as the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity facing urban communities in the United States? Cimajie?
I would say I think the greatest challenge is the lack of community within our communities, if that makes sense. When I speak to aunts, great aunts, uncles, they always talk about this sense of community that existed in neighborhoods, how the person down the street could, how they could discipline the child if they needed to, or if someone needed food, that they were there. I think that sense of having each other's back has been lost, and it's been replaced with a every man for himself and a God for us all sort of mentality in inner city neighborhoods. On the flip side of that, I think the greatest opportunity that exists is the technology age that we're living in. When we look at where we are today, July 12th, 2021, there has been no other point in history that people living in inner city neighborhoods have had greater access to things. And that access breeds opportunity, in my opinion. So.
What say you, Calvin Mackie?
I definitely agree with Cimajie about one of our greatest challenges is that of community. But I think there's even a greater challenge, even if we were to bring back to community, the real question is one of relevance. Will we be relevant? I remember, I've talked about how in the aftermath of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1944, they created the automatic cotton picker. And when they created the automatic cotton picker, it displaced 5 million African Americans from Jim Crow South because their hands and backs was no longer needed. And since 1944, we've been fighting this battle against technology for our own relevance. And now when you start looking at not only the breakdown of community, and you think about the African proverb that said, I am because you are, that really tied us together. We've bought into what Ms. Cimajie was talking about, this Descartes philosophy of I think, therefore I am. The individualistic greed is all about me, mine, and I'm going to get it. Well, even if we bring back community, the question is, how do we create relevance in that community such that we can create an economy, a political system, an educational system that support us and make sure that we'll be here for another 250 years or so.
So I know that both of you guys and Dr. Mackie, I wanted to ask you to give me the greatest opportunity also, but I was just compelled by that which Cimajie lifted up as a great opportunity was also identified by you, Dr. Mackie, as a threat in the sense of if there is not a relevance that is attached to it.
And thank you for bringing that back, because I forgot to bring that home and tie it up and put a bow on it. Technology is definitely our greatest threat, but it's also our greatest opportunity. Now, the question is, how are we going to approach this technology? The question is, are we going to continue to be a consumer and a purveyor and an influencer of technology? Or are we going to get on the supply side or the production side and produce the technology, own the technology, and take the wealth from the technology and create this beloved community like Martin Luther King talked about? We have to remember, I'll never forget a quote, and economist said, you have to remember the labor that competes with slave labor will suffer the consequences of that competition. So when I start talking about the automatic cotton picker and the fact that 5 million African Americans in 1944, 99% of cotton was being picked by hand. And in this summer day in Clarksdale, Mississippi, 3,000 farmers came together and they saw something that they had never seen before. They saw one machine that did the work of 100 African Americans. And so the slave of that day became the automatic cotton picker. So the real question of today is, what would be the slave of today, and will we be able to compete? And the slave of today is automation, machine learning, machine language, computers and robotics. And I've been to places. I've seen robots just totally displace entire workforce. So, in terms of getting the work done. Right now in Silicon Valley, Andrew Yang, when he ran for president, brought something to the forefront that we have been discussing for the last 10 years. And I've been going to Silicon Valley talking about universal basic income for the last 10 years. The question is, if we're going to be disrupted by technology, how do we extract from technology to take care of community? And people say, well, you mean to tell me you're going to tax the technology, then everybody receive a check? They said, yeah. They said, that sounds like welfare. I said, no, welfare is only relevant when they're talking about low income, low resource, primarily Black and brown people. You need a big, very sophisticated term, universal basic income, when you're talking about giving it to the majority population.
Cimajie, I see your head moving. I see your eyes flicking. I see some. I know you're well enough to hear the wheels turning. What you thinking?
I'm in agreement. I'm over here snapping my fingers and just I agree 1,000%. Even when we think about the spaces that Black creators are curating and how they're often co-opted, right, and taken mainstream, and we get absolutely nothing from it, from something as futile as a TikTok dance. I don't know if you all know right now, but Black TikTokers are on strike because they make these dances to songs, and then they're taken mainstream by, white TikTokers, and they never get credit for them. And so they're quite literally on strike right now. And so something as futile as a TikTok dance serves as a microcosm of what happens when Black tech and Black AI aren't, I don't even know the word for it, but when we aren't planning for 50 plus years into the future. That's something that we as Black people don't do well, in my opinion. But when we don't understand the value of what we have in our hand, I think. And so I absolutely agree, Dr. Mackie, 1,000%.
So let me ask you guys a question. So when it comes to responding to the environment that we see, one that is ripe with opportunity for relevance, and meaning, but also risky in terms of relevance and to actually participate meaningfully in the economics of things. And Dr. Mackie, you totally rejected earlier this rugged individualism that we see. And so what is the response? What institutions do you guys believe, or are institutions a part of creating relevance in these days? And if so, in what way?
Institutions are the gatekeepers, or the protectors of culture and community. And it's the institutions that make sure that your culture and community thrive, into the future, from one generation to the next. Is passed along and is curated in these institutions and then passed along. But I'll never forget when I got to Morehouse College, and one time I met Maynard Jackson. And one thing about going to Morehouse, the most amazing experience we would have would be just talking to these people, just carte blanche, off the mic. This is not no political thing. They'll come to the college and talk to us. And Maynard Jackson said one thing. He said, everything come down to three things. He said, it's the book, the ballot, and a buck. And I mean, that hit me in my head so hard. The book, the ballot, and the buck. So when we start talking about institutions, we gotta define what institutions are gonna maintain this book, right? I mean, what is it about the book, the education, and what institutions that we need to make sure that we're getting the knowledge that we need to pass forward? Whether it's the church, whether it's the colleges, whether it's K-12, whether it's our community-based programs and our cultural centers. But those institutions have to be the protector of the book, the ballot. One place where I think we just have skewed so far right that I don't know if we can come back, and that we really do believe that politicians are gonna solve all our problems. Politicians are the ones. Somebody told me when you're 3 feet ahead of somebody, you're a leader. When you're 10 feet ahead, you're a target. And so many of our politicians are so far ahead that they're even a target for us. Even if they're fighting for us, we don't even know that they're fighting. And what they don't realize a lot of times is politics without economics is symbol without substance. So we elect people, but they're funded by other people. So they are more responsive to the other people that funded them than the people needs who otherwise voted for them. So, a lot of times you got Black politicians who are only managers of white people wealth and hope that Black people can get something out of it. And then the buck, right? We got to get the economics. The politics follow the economics. I don't care what it was. Now, Obama taught us that organized people beat organized money every time, but the organized people got to be organized around the economics. How do we get the economics back into our community? How do we start businesses? How do we support these businesses? How do we take that wealth and pass it on from family to family? And more importantly, even in this tech movement, a lot of my friends have made a lot of movement in tech, and they're more about building a brand and showing what they got on Instagram and traveling the world saying, look at me, rather than put that money back into the community to build other little tech guys and girls like them. So they fall into the same trap. Right now, we got a problem. Everybody want to be famous. And now we honor people for the virtue of their wealth rather than the wealth of their virtues. So we're creating a whole lot of people with wealth who want the fame. We're not creating the people with wealth who otherwise saying, I want to create a legacy such that when my eyes don't open, this world would know that I lived.
So Cimajie, you have certainly in our conversations previously, you've talked about the challenges of some of the institutions that have existed, and you've actually challenged some of the institutions that have existed. And so, what do you think about this matter?
First of all, Dr. Mackie, we can really pass the collection plate now if I didn't know you was gonna get on here and preach like that. Wow. Yes, I agree with it. I agree with it all. I think the one that I would add is adequate healthcare institutions in our community.
Yep. There you go.
When we look at inner city communities, whether it be Dallas, Baton Rouge, Atlanta. There are huge pockets of people who don't have access to adequate health care and who think, like Dr. Mackie put, that the politicians that they elect are going to be the ones to change those systems. And that's just not the case. That's not how America was set up. Unfortunately, no matter what they tell you in government class, that's not how it works. And Dr. Mackie, to your point about the people we elect being indebted to their donors, I mentioned that I do development work, and I see this all too often, whether it be in politics or even at a nonprofit level. For a nonprofit that's working boots on the ground, building capacity in communities, they're often indebted to their white donors who live across town, who don't know what's going on, who haven't ever set foot in the neighborhood, yet they have to appease them with some level of, poverty porn to make them feel good about the donation that they're giving. So agree 1,000%. I would absolutely say that adequate education, whether it be K through 12, university, the Black church, and I think this is what you're talking about, PJ. I do believe that the Black church has a role to play in the development of inner city communities. I think historically speaking, I mean, all of us here know the history, but historically speaking, it's been our place of peace. It's been our place of sanctuary. It's been our place to hold the community meetings, to have the politicians come speak, to have, Sunday schools to educate people. And I don't think we can discount its importance as we continue to fight for equity in this world. So in addition to the three that Dr. Mackie mentioned, I would say healthcare and the church.
Well, and so in being a former preacher, I certainly had to make Dr. Mackie's 3 B's continue. So Cimajie, I have the book, Ballot, Buck, and Body to Dr. Mackie's list. And so what are the institutions? Do we have to tweak the institutions that we have? Are we at a point in time when there are new institutions that are created? Are we at a point, Dr. Mackie, where things like the emergence of STEMNOLA and others, where we have these disruptive forces that are performing the roles that institutions have historically performed?
I always get in trouble when I start talking about these institutions, because you see, I showed my son the other day a trophy that I won like 30 years ago. I said, your daddy was a bad boy before this COVID wait. I said, son, really, you can see I got to jump. I don't move as much, but I had a trophy that designated the fact that 30 years ago I must have been bad. And that trophy is nothing but a relic now of what I used to be. I can look at that trophy and talk about what I did, how I did it, but that trophy means nothing to who I am today. And that's the problem with that trophy. And many of our institutions, they become like trophies. They keep talking about what they did. They keep talking about how they did it. They keep honoring the people, and they did that did it without talking about how they are relevant today in addressing the issues of today, addressing the concerns of today, addressing the people of today, using a narrative that the people of today can gather around. We don't need new institutions. We need institutions to recommit to their mission and their purpose. And for example, what I've created with STEMNOLA, I mean, we have the National Society of Black Engineers. And if the National Society of Black Engineers, which I'm a life member of, was doing what they were supposed to be doing, the work that I'm doing wouldn't be necessary. But nobody even knows who the National Society of Black Engineers is, unless you Black engineer. Most of the Black engineers don't even know who they are, because the only thing they do is get money from corporate America and have a little career fair to try to deliver the bodies that corporate America need. And I'm not opposed to that. I'm like, yes, and. We get caught up. We want to celebrate this little thing we're doing without realizing that there's so much more work we need to be doing. And then we challenge these institutions to do what they need to be doing, comprehensively. Then they get defensive. And like I just told my team today, we had an event on Saturday. It's always just saying, yeah, this was very good, but we got to work on this. And there's a lot of things that the institutions that exist today need to work on. And one thing that they need to work on is coming into the 21st century.
Cimajie, we need to challenge the institutions? Do we need to create new ones? Is it just disruptive opportunity, or is it all of the above? What do you
It's
think?
all of the above. It has to be. In order to truly in order to truly see change, we need to look at the institutions that we have, say, okay, and triage which ones are truly doing the work, and do we see impact coming from? Which ones, as Dr. Mackie said, are relics of a time past and aren't doing the work, but simply hold these gatekeeper keys because I once did and I once was. I know we're going to maybe talk about this later, but I think that's when we see a clashing of generations.
Yep.
Is when you have young people who are fired up and want to do things, and they encounter older generations who are holding the keys and who say, well, this is how we've always done it. I'm a millennial who absolutely rejects that this is the way it's always been done, so this is the way it has to continue to be done mindset. And I think that's where we see a clash a lot of the times. And that's not to say to just get rid of all of them, but we do need to work smart and not hard and be strategic in the way that we're doing things. And if it's no longer serving us, or if it hasn't come into the 21st century, then what are we doing?
So how do we build those spaces where intergenerational relationships and intergenerational work can happen? Cimajie, you've identified, yourself as this millennial in challenge mode. Calvin, you pointed to your trophy, 30 years ago. The difference between you and I is my trophy has like 40 years on it. And so you have these different generations. How do you create spaces where the generations bring their best selves to the work collectively rather than in conflict?
I think it has to start with a mutual respect, and establishing that mutual respect for both parties very early on is what's most critical, in my opinion. I can say that I'm a disruptor, I'm a challenger, because the respect that I have for my elders runs so deep. It runs so deep that I can't even. So, Dr. Mackie, PJ and I have mutual friends, right? But I met him as Pastor Jetson, and so I often still refer to him as Pastor Jetson. It throws people off because that's not the context that people met him in. And so they're like, "Oh, Ray," and I'm like, "Oh." Like the Southerner in me, the woman who was taught yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir, cannot bring myself on any level to ever address him as Ray. I can't do that. And so because my respect and my upbringing runs so deep with my elders, I feel that I'm one of those millennials, and I know several of them who can respectfully challenge the things that are in an attempt to get further and advance this mission that we all have. And so I think if we can all approach it with that lens in mind, of mutual respect and wanting to learn and truly understanding that we don't know everything, then we can create those spaces.
Absolutely start with respect. The one thing I always think about, you hear a lot of people out here talking about their mentoring. And a lot of men say, I want to mentor. And a lot of men say, I'm going to set up a mentoring program. And, we're always talking about creating programs for men and women to mentor boys and girls into men and women. But you very rarely hear about programs for elders to mentor men and women to elders. So they got to be a situation. They got to be mutual respect. But we got to understand also that there are different phases of our life. And some people, they get to a certain age and they say, I'm no longer a boy, no, I'm a man now, but they continue to act like a boy. And then when they should be acting like an elder, they still acting like a man because they waited too late to stop acting like a boy. And before they shut their eyes, they never have the opportunity to serve and sit in the seat of an elder because they were still chasing the golden ring to prove and validate their so-called manhood. So when we start talking about intergenerational engagement, we as a community have to make a decision about who we are. And I just believe, there's something called, personhood, manhood, and then chiefhood. My daddy told me that personhood is about getting to a position where you can take care of yourself. Manhood is getting to a position where you can take care of yourself and those that you're responsible for. But chiefhood is getting to a position where you can take care of not only yourself, not only those that you're responsible for, but take care of the whole community. And when we have those type of people, like what you've created, Justin, I mean, when you create what you're creating, when you're bringing voices like this together, that create that dynamic conversation such that we can gain that mutual respect, such that we can create, you know what I talk about, Justin, in terms of a high-functioning community. And for me, a high-functioning community is child-centered, adult-governed, and elder-ruled. So everything we do got to be through the lenses of what's in the best interest of our children. And all of the adults got to get up, and they got to work like cats and dogs as long as they can to build wealth, to provide the resources and everything that we need in the community so that the kids can flourish. Like Ivan Guard, that young girl didn't happen by accident. She ain't pop out of a toaster. She ain't come out of a box. It is clear somebody had their hands on her, i.e. an adult. And I promise you, the adults who had their hands on that little girl, I bet you they have elders in their life. And I bet you those elders are pouring into them and they're doing the work to create the pathway so this girl can pursue all of her dreams, all of her passions, all of her God-given gifts. In a high-functioning community, that's what we should be creating intergenerationally for all of our children.
What do we do next, Cimajie? How do we begin to shift that reality?
Conversations like this, but on a mass scale, right, across the country, really looking at our communities and saying, okay, well, this is what I know. What do you know? And how can we leverage both of these things to advance us? So if it was myself and Dr. Mackie in the room, it's, okay, well, I didn't have the opportunity to meet Maynard Jackson and sit down and talk to him. What did you learn from him? And to be able to sit at an elder's feet and just learn from him and yield because millennials do have a tendency, I will yield this, to one, be eager to want to do things right now. We grew up in a microwave society, and so we want things like this. And so to yield all of the stereotypes that come along with being a millennial, and to sit down and say, okay, this is what I want to do. I know that you know this thing that I don't. I've been through this thing that you haven't, being a young person in the 21st century. How do we amalgamate these two things to get to a point that we both want to be at?
So I have enjoyed engaging with you guys, and you know, before I close my eyes, one of the things that I want to do is create meaningful platforms for what is described now as co-generation, where the Cimajie Best and the Calvin Mackie bring their shared gifts and co-create a path that makes life better for the community. And so I wanted to leave you guys with this one. And it's 5 years from now. Imagine it's 5 years from now, and you are wildly successful in your efforts, such as they are. What's that look like, Cimajie?
I think for me, it looks like I've done the work of engaging foundations, high net worth donors, both white and of color, to think about their capital allocation processes and making sure they're equitable. I've redirected millions of dollars to underserved communities in Dallas and across the country. And I think ultimately I've done the work in the next 5 years to really capture this, not only the zeitgeist of the country now, but like this feeling that we have of time's up and like we need change right now today. And how we're doing that. When I say we, how Black people are doing that in every sector, from social justice to education justice to climate justice to longevity and aging justice, and what that looks like.
Thank you. Brother Mackie, it's 5 years from now.
You know,
what's it look like?
I wrote something on the internet the other day, a quote I heard, and it said, "You're going to be too much for some people. Remember, those are not your people." We have to find our tribe. And hip hop has really given us the blueprint. I mean, with all of the issues and the challenges that I have with hip hop as it is today, and the way it's been codified, and the way it's been culturally appropriated, in a way it's even doing damage to our community in the way it's being presented, they found their tribe. And they stick together, and they're able to present a message even when a parent saying, this is not the message I want for my kids. It penetrates through all different types of barriers that I set up around my two sons in my community. And the values that they present is not values that otherwise would sustain us. In 5 years, what I'm trying to do is find my tribe and create a tribe and find the people with the same morals, the same values, the same ethics, that want the same thing for our children. And we have the political, the philosophical, then the monetary resources to make sure that eyes and ears of our children are protected so that they can pursue the greatness that God has put within their heart unencumbered. They shouldn't have to argue with themselves and fight with their consciousness about whether or not they're selling out by reading a book or whether they're selling out by pursuing becoming a doctor. But they know that if this is what God has put on my heart, this is the way I'm going to contribute to the world. And with Stemnola now, we're doing that. I mean, we are literally changing a generation in New Orleans. We're changing the mindset and the buying pattern and the behavior of parents such that we're seeing a benefit in their kids. We've engaged nearly 70,000 kids right here in this geographic area. In the next 5 years, the question is, can we drop this in 50 different cities and engage 1 million people such that not that we make a move, but that we've created a movement that would outlive us.
Yeah, so I'm over here snapping my finger at that point. And what I hope is to create spaces where the transformative work that a Cimajie best does in the donor and in the philanthropic circles accrues to the benefit of serious, scalable work in communities like Stemnola. That's the place that I am looking to occupy in life. And so, Cimajie Best, thank you so much for your time and for your contribution to this conversation. Dr. Calvin Mackie, it's always a joy to spend time with you, and I'm thankful. You guys with the Angel Trois, and I'm sure that there will be one that will get a bunch of comments from both. I'm certain of that. So thank you guys.
Hey, thank you and love you, brother.
Thank you. Love you, Peter.
Thank you guys for your time. God bless. Take care.
God bless Cimajie. Y'all take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.